Most people think FBI's most wanted terrorist would be some cartel boss. But what if I tell you that it's a Harvard-educated genius living in a 10 by 12 cabin with no electricity? And for 17 years, he outsmarted everyone. In the heart of the American wilderness, hidden beneath pine trees and paranoia, lived a man the FBI couldn't catch. No digital footprint, no patterns, just handwritten manifestos and packages that exploded without warning. For nearly 2 decades, the Unabomber haunted America like a ghost. Brilliant, reclusive, and lethal. As agents scrambled and the death toll climbed, they began to wonder, were they hunting a terrorist, a genius, or something in between? This is the story of Theodore John Kaczynski, the man behind the myth, and the longest, most frustrating manhunt in FBI history. 1978, Northwestern University, Illinois. A quiet campus day is shattered by a sudden explosion. A mysterious package left in a hallway detonates, injuring a security officer. It is the first attack of an unknown serial bomber. In the following year, another bomb at Northwestern injures a graduate student. Then in November 1979, a third bomb exploded in the cargo hold of American Airlines Flight 444, filling the plane with smoke and forcing an emergency landing. Miraculously, the aircraft lands safely, but about a dozen passengers suffer smoke inhalation injuries. By now, it is clear these incidents are connected. A single shadowy figure is orchestrating a campaign of terror. The FBI launches a task force as more bombs follow. Investigators codename the case UNABOM, short for University and Airline Bomber. Over the next 17 years, this elusive assailant mails or hand-delivers a series of increasingly sophisticated homemade bombs, striking targets across the country. There is no apparent pattern to the victims. Professors, airline officials, computer store owners, they seem to have little in common, leaving the public and police baffled. Each explosive device is expertly built from easily obtainable scrap materials, leaving virtually no forensic evidence for investigators to follow. On some bombs, the killer even plants false clues, hints designed to mislead and taunt the authorities. Fear spreads nationwide as the bombings continue into the 1980s and 1990s. The unidentified Unabomber remains completely anonymous, a ghost who strikes without warning and vanishes without trace. 3 people are ultimately killed, and 23 more are injured in total. Air travel, university campuses, and mailrooms fall under a cloud of dread. Anyone, anywhere, could be the next victim. A composite police sketch of a hooded man in dark glasses is released to the public, but no one knows the bomber's identity. For law enforcement, tracking this phantom becomes one of the nation's longest and most challenging manhunts. How do you catch an invisible killer who leaves no trace? To the world, the Unabomber was a mystery, but behind the moniker stood Theodore John Kaczynski, better known as Ted Kaczynski. From a young age, Kaczynski showed extraordinary intellect. Born in 1942, he tested at a genius-level IQ and even skipped multiple grades in school. At 16, he entered Harvard University on a scholarship, socially awkward but academically brilliant. By his mid-20s, Kaczynski had earned a PhD in mathematics and become an assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley. Colleagues recall him as shy and intensely intelligent, a quiet young man who seemed destined for a life of scholarly achievement. Then abruptly, this promising academic vanished from modern society. In 1969, Kaczynski resigned from his faculty position without explanation. By 1971, he had retreated to a one-room cabin he built in the wilderness outside Lincoln, Montana. The cabin had no electricity or running water, a deliberate choice so he could live simply and off the grid, isolated from civilization. Here, surrounded by dense forest and silence, Kaczynski survived by hunting wild game and growing vegetables, with occasional financial help from his family. In this lonely mountain refuge, the brilliant mathematician transformed into a hardened recluse. Cut off from the modern world he hated, he stewed in his anger and nurtured radical ideas. Kaczynski's motive was neither money nor personal vendetta. It was ideology. Over years of solitude, he developed an extreme philosophy that viewed modern technology and industrial society as the ultimate evil. He believed that technological progress was ruining nature and stripping away human freedom, arguing that only a revolution against the modern system could save humanity. In writings that would later form a notorious manifesto, Kaczynski railed against everything from computers to organized society, urging a return to a primitive life, even if violence was needed to make that happen. In his mind, he was not a criminal, but a revolutionary, a lone warrior fighting to overthrow a system that he felt was destroying the world. From his remote cabin, this idealist began to turn his beliefs into brutal action. Kaczynski methodically constructed bombs by hand, each device a deadly expression of his anti-technology creed. And he chose victims who he believed personified the industrial system's threat. University scientists, airline executives, computer store owners, anyone symbolizing technological progress became a target in his one-man war. This was not just a killer on the loose. This was a man at war with the entire modern world. His genius, twisted by isolation and hate, had turned into a force for terror, By 1995, the Unabomber's deadly campaign had spanned 17 years without capture. In June of that year, the elusive bomber made an unprecedented move. He sent a sprawling 35,000-word manifesto to the New York Times and the Washington Post. In it, he demanded that his essay, titled Industrial Society and Its Future, be published nationwide, and in return, he promised to cease his bombing campaign. It was a chilling ultimatum from a terrorist who had proved his resolve. The FBI and the newspapers agonized over the decision. Ultimately, under the guidance of FBI Director Louis Freeh and Attorney General Janet Reno, authorities took the desperate gamble. The manifesto was published in the Washington Post in September 1995. True to the bomber's word, the bombing stopped thereafter. The manifesto's publication proved to be the turning point. Among the millions who read the Unabomber's rant against technology, one reader stood out: David Kaczynski, Ted's younger brother. As David pored over the published manifesto, he was struck by the familiarity of the ideas and language. Certain phrases and misspellings echoed letters that his estranged brother Ted had written in the past. David Kaczynski suddenly faced an agonizing dilemma: the realization that the monster terrorizing the nation might be his own brother. He was torn between family loyalty and moral duty, between protecting Ted or saving innocent lives. In early 1996, David made the painful choice to turn Ted in. He confidentially contacted the FBI and provided old letters and essays written by his brother for comparison. Investigators moved quickly on the new lead. Linguistic analysts compared the Unabomber's manifesto with Ted Kaczynski's writings and found distinctive patterns that almost certainly proved they were authored by the same person. Combined with details of Ted's life, his Chicago upbringing, his time at Berkeley, and his years in the Montana woods, the FBI had enough evidence for a search warrant. The no-name hermit now had a name and an address. After almost 2 decades of frustration, the trap was set. On April 3, 1996, a swarm of federal agents descended upon a tiny wooden cabin outside Lincoln, Montana. Inside that shack in the woods was the most wanted man in America, and he had no idea they were coming. The remote cabin in Lincoln, Montana, where Ted Kaczynski lived in seclusion and was arrested by the FBI on April 3, 1996. The raid on the Unabomber's cabin marked the end of the longest manhunt in FBI history. Inside the tiny, cluttered shack, agents discovered a trove of incriminating evidence. They found bomb components and explosives in various stages of assembly, as well as 40,000 pages of handwritten journals detailing bomb-making experiments and past crimes. Among the items seized was a manual typewriter, the very machine Kaczynski had used to type out his anti-technology manifesto. The nation's most elusive terrorist was finally in custody, his 17-year reign of terror officially over. Kaczynski was transferred to face justice. Federal prosecutors charged him with multiple counts of murder and terrorism. From the beginning of legal proceedings, Ted Kaczynski made it clear he did not want to be labeled insane. He adamantly rejected his own lawyers' plans to mount an insanity defense, even attempting to fire them to stop it. For Kaczynski, being seen as insane would undermine the very ideology that drove him. Ultimately, to avoid a potential death sentence at trial, he agreed to a plea deal. In January 1998, Kaczynski pleaded guilty to all federal charges, and he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. He was consigned to the sterile solitude of a supermax prison cell in Colorado, destined to live out his remaining days in silence. Behind bars, the Unabomber remained unrepentant. Over the years, he occasionally corresponded with journalists and academics, defending his views on technology and society. But the world would never again face his violence. In June 2023, after nearly 25 years in prison, Ted Kaczynski died by suicide in his cell at the age of 81. Kaczynski's story has now passed into American legend, a grim cautionary tale of genius gone awry. It highlights the thin line between brilliance and madness and the destructive potential of extreme isolation and ideology. The Unabomber's life is a stark warning of how a gifted mind, warped by hatred and disconnected from humanity, can inflict untold pain on the world. He lived in silence for years, but his bombs spoke louder than words. And that was the story of the Unabomber. A brilliant mind turned deadly. If this made you think twice about genius, power, and isolation, then you're exactly who I make these videos for. Hit like, share it with someone who loves dark, real stories, and if you haven't already, subscribe, because the next story, it's even more unbelievable.